Cliff Richard, Britain's eternal bachelor, the man who dodged every wedding bell for 6 decades, has finally been caught. And trust me, nobody saw this coming. For years, fans speculated, tabloids dug deep, and still nothing. But now, the secret is out. The name attached to Cliff's heart right now is turning heads, dropping jaws, and rewriting everything the world thought it knew about him. This isn't just a rumor. This isn't just tabloid noise. This is the real story. Raw, unexpected, and absolutely jaw-dropping. The twist? Even his closest friends didn't see it coming. Who is this mystery person who captured the heart of music's most guarded legend? Stay with us, because we're about to reveal the truth that changes everything. The man behind the legend. Here's something most people don't know about Cliff Richard. See, the man the world calls Britain's eternal pop star wasn't even born in Britain. On October 14, 1940, a boy named Harry Roger Webb came into the world not in London, not in Manchester, but in Lucknow, India. His father, Roger Webb, worked for a catering company under British colonial rule, managing supplies and logistics in a country that was, at that point, still under the British Empire. It wasn't a wealthy posting. It was steady work in an uncertain world. His mother, Dorothy, raised the family with strong values and an even stronger Christian faith, the kind of faith that wasn't just Sunday morning tradition. It was daily life. It shaped the rules, the conversations, and the expectations inside that household. When Harry was 8 years old, the family packed everything and made the long journey to England. It's settling in Hertfordshire, a quiet, unremarkable county northwest of London. No fanfare, no welcome party. Just a working-class family trying to build something solid in a country that felt both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. Life in England wasn't glamorous. Money was tight. The house was small. Harry shared space with his parents and 3 sisters, growing up in the kind of environment where you learned early that resources were limited and complaints were pointless. His father worked hard. His mother kept the household running on faith, routine, and sheer determination. But inside that carefully controlled world, something was happening that nobody could quite contain. Harry Webb was falling in love with rock and roll, not quietly either. He was obsessed. While the Webb household ran on Sunday church services, Bible readings, and early bedtimes, Harry was secretly staying up late with Elvis Presley records pressed close to his ears so nobody would hear. He studied every note, every lyric, the way Elvis moved, the way his voice bent around a word, the raw electricity that came through even on a scratchy vinyl record. Harry absorbed all of it. He wasn't just a fan, he was a student. His parents gave him structure. Elvis Presley gave him fire. And that exact combination, discipline on one side, rebellion on the other, became the engine that would eventually power one of the longest careers in British music history. But here's the part that never makes it into the standard biography. That same household, the one built on faith, restraint, and doing things the right way, planted something else inside Harry Webb. Something quieter, harder to name. A deep and genuinely complicated relationship with love itself. With commitment. With what a proper relationship was supposed to look like, and what it cost a person to maintain one. The tension between faith and feeling never left him. Between wanting connection and fearing what keeping it might require. Every relationship he ever had, and there were several, carried that tension inside it. And those relationships? They are far more fascinating than anyone ever reported. Rise to fame career journey. In 1958, Harry Webb walked into a recording studio and walked out as Cliff Richard, and Britain was never the same again. His debut single, Move It, dropped like a thunderbolt. Music critics, who had spent years saying Britain couldn't produce real rock and roll, suddenly had nothing to say. The song was raw, electric, and completely homegrown. No American influence needed. Cliff had done what nobody thought possible. He had given Britain its own rock and roll identity. He was 17 years old. Within months, he was everywhere. Television appearances, sold-out shows, screaming fans chasing his car down the street. He went from a quiet kid in Hertfordshire to the most talked-about name in British music almost overnight. His backing band, The Shadows, became legends in their own right. Together, they created a sound that defined a generation. Then came the 1960s, and Cliff didn't slow down. He evolved. While other artists from the same era faded or stayed stuck in one sound, Cliff shifted. He moved into light pop, took on film roles in movies like The Young Ones and Summer Holiday, and became something beyond a musician. He became a cultural icon, and the kind of person that parents liked and their kids adored, which, in the 1960s, was almost impossible to pull off. By the time the 1970s arrived, most of his peers were struggling to stay relevant. Cliff was still charting hits. By the 1980s, when punk and new wave were taking over, Cliff released We Don't Talk Anymore, which hit #1 in 19 countries. 19. That's not luck. That's something else entirely. Then came the move that genuinely shocked the industry. In the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Cliff began incorporating Christian themes into his music and performances. He had always been privately religious, but now it was public. He performed gospel concerts. He spoke openly about his faith in interviews. And rather than losing his audience, he somehow kept them. By the 1990s, he had a knighthood. Sir Cliff Richard. The boy from Lucknow, India, now a knight of the British Empire. Over 6 decades, over 250 million records sold. More than 130 singles charted in the UK. 14 #1 hits, and through all of it, not a single confirmed long-term romantic partner. Not one wedding. Not one public relationship that lasted. For a man that successful, that famous, that loved by the public, doesn't that feel just a little bit strange? Romantic past. This is the part that people have been trying to piece together for decades. Because Cliff Richard's love life is not a simple story. It's a puzzle, and every relationship adds one more piece. It started in the early 1960s, backstage at the London Palladium. Delia Wicks was a dancer in the show's cast, and she caught Cliff's attention in a way nobody had before. When their connection was quiet, early morning coffee dates, occasional outings, always careful, always discreet. Cliff was already famous by this point, and he knew what a visible relationship could do to his career. His fan base was fiercely devoted, and any hint of serious romance could turn them hostile. So, the relationship lived in the shadows. Eventually, Cliff ended it. His reasoning, as he later shared in interviews, was straightforward. His career was accelerating, and he didn't believe he could give a relationship the attention it deserved. Whether that was the full truth or simply the easiest explanation, only he knows. What it revealed, though, was a pattern. A man who felt deeply, but always found a reason to step back. A few years later in Blackpool, Cliff met Jackie Irving, another dancer. See, another connection that felt different from the rest. This time, the relationship got further. There were genuine talks about a future together. People around Cliff began to wonder if this was finally it. Then came a number that changed everything. 25 to 30%. That was the estimated portion of Cliff's fan base that his advisors told him he could lose if he married. In the music industry of the 1960s, a pop star's appeal was partly built on availability, on the idea that he could, theoretically, be yours. A wedding ring shattered that fantasy. Cliff broke things off with Jackie. The decision reportedly came through a mutual friend, handled with care, but still devastating for her. It wasn't that the feeling wasn't real, it was that the cost of following that feeling felt too high. Fast forward to the late 1970s. See, tennis champion Sue Barker came into Cliff's life, and suddenly, Britain had a new obsession. The pop icon and the sports star, it was the kind of pairing that tabloids dream about. They were photographed together at charity events, Wimbledon, and concerts. The public went wild. Cliff himself later admitted that his feelings for Sue were genuine and deep. But once again, something stopped him from going all the way. In later interviews, Cliff was honest about it. His devotion to performing, to music, to a life lived mostly on stage and in studios, it simply didn't leave space for the kind of full commitment that a marriage requires. Sue deserved someone who could be present, and Cliff, by his own admission, couldn't promise that. Their breakup was quiet. No scandal, no drama, just two people acknowledging that love, on its own, isn't always enough. Then there was Olivia Newton-John. And this one is different from the rest. Cliff and Olivia had a friendship that stretched across decades. They performed together, toured together, appeared on each other's television specials. And anyone who watched them together could feel that something was there, something underneath the professional warmth that neither of them ever put into words publicly. Cliff has acknowledged, carefully and quietly, that Olivia stirred real feelings in him. But she was in other relationships, and Cliff always measured, always discreet, never pushed. When Olivia passed away in August 2022 after a long battle with cancer, Cliff's response was understated in the way that only genuine grief can be. No dramatic public statement, just quiet reverence, and the kind of stillness that tells you more than any words could. Some connections don't get a label. Some of the most real things in a person's life are the ones they never announce. But none of these relationships, not Delia, not Jackie, not Sue, not even Olivia, generated as many questions as the one that came next. Mystery and controversy. For almost 30 years, one name appeared consistently in Cliff Richard's life: John Macklin. They met in the early 2000s. John was a former Catholic priest who had left the clergy. How exactly they crossed paths has never been fully explained publicly. But what happened after they met is a matter of record. John moved into Cliff's home in Barbados. And he stayed. For nearly 3 decades, they lived together under the same roof. See, Cliff called John his companion. He described him as someone who provided stability, support, and genuine friendship during some of the hardest periods of his life. When the 2014 police investigation, later proven completely unfounded, upended Cliff's world, it was John who was there. When the BBC broadcast footage of a raid on Cliff's home in 2018, and Cliff fought back legally and won a landmark privacy case, John was by his side. 3 decades is not a casual arrangement. And yet, every time the media tried to define what their relationship actually was, Cliff shut it down firmly. He guarded that particular truth with more care than almost anything else in his public life. The speculation, predictably, ran wild. The tabloids had a field day. A famously single pop star, a former priest. The 3 decades of cohabitation, the rumor mill had everything it needed. Cliff's response was consistent. He valued privacy. He refused to be defined by other people's labels. And whatever existed between him and John was not something he owed the public an explanation for. Then, in late 2022, John Macklin passed away. Cliff's grief was visible, even through his characteristic reserve. He didn't make a grand public statement, But those who watched him closely said the loss hit him deeply in the way that losing someone truly central to your life always does. And with John gone, the questions didn't disappear. They grew louder, because now there was no one left to ask. The chapter had closed, and the full story of what those 3 decades really meant had gone with it. Here's what makes this genuinely fascinating. And beyond the gossip, Cliff Richard, in all his years in the public eye, has never once confirmed or denied being gay. He has spoken about his Christian faith extensively. He has spoken about loneliness. He has spoken about choosing singlehood over a bad relationship. But on the specific question of his he has maintained a silence so complete and so deliberate that it became its own kind of answer, though not one anyone could fully decode. In 2024, at 83 years old, Cliff Richard remains one of the most recognized names in British music. And the question of who truly holds or held his heart remains genuinely, fascinatingly unanswered. So who is Cliff Richard's current lover? Is there someone new? Is the chapter still open? Keep watching, because we haven't reached the end of this story yet. Here's what we know now. Here is where things get interesting. In recent years, Cliff Richard has been living what looks, from the outside, like a carefully curated, quiet life. He splits his time between 3 properties: his longtime Barbados retreat, a villa in Portugal's Algarve region, and his base back in the UK. For a man of 83, he remains remarkably active. He still performs occasionally. He still gives interviews. He still shows up at events and commands every room he walks into the same way he did 60 years ago. But something shifted, quietly, almost invisibly until it wasn't. In 2023, photographs began circulating. Not paparazzi shots taken from a distance with a long lens. Something closer than that. Images from social gatherings, private events, moments that felt too relaxed to be staged. And in several of them, he standing near Cliff consistently, repeatedly, was someone new. Not a familiar face from his musical circle. Not a long-time industry associate. Not someone pulled from the long list of names that have orbited his world for decades. This was different. Someone whose presence raised eyebrows precisely because nobody could immediately place them. Nobody had a file on this person. Nobody had a quote ready. And in the world of celebrity coverage, that kind of anonymity is almost impossible to maintain unless someone very deliberate is working very hard to protect it. Which, if you know anything about Cliff Richard, sounds exactly like him. Details have come out in pieces. A comment from a close friend here, a cropped photograph there, a reference in an interview that stopped just short of saying anything definitive. And the information has moved the way water moves through a crack in stone, slowly, steadily, impossible to fully stop, but also impossible to fully read. What the people closest to Cliff have said, carefully and without specifics, is that he seems settled. Content in a way that feels different from the composed public face he has worn for decades. There is a difference between a man who is managing his solitude well and a man who simply isn't alone anymore. And those who have spent real time around him recently suggest the latter. At 83, after a career that spanned more than 6 decades, after relationships that never quite reached the finish line, after a 30-year companionship that the world never fully understood and that ended in grief, Cliff Richard appears to have found something. Or someone. What we can say with certainty is this. Whoever has earned a place in the most guarded private life in British entertainment history is someone the world was not expecting. Not from his past, not from his industry. Someone who exists, for now, just outside the frame. The story is still unfolding. And if Cliff Richard's entire life has taught us one thing, the truth, when it finally arrives, lands harder than any rumor ever could. Who is this person? Drop your theories in the comments, because we have a feeling this chapter is only just beginning. And that is the story of Cliff Richard, a man who gave the world his music, but never quite gave anyone his whole heart. Or did he? Maybe he gave it completely, just never to someone the world was allowed to see. 6 decades of speculation, a handful of almost loves, a 130-year mystery that passed away quietly in 2022, and now a new name circling the edges of his private world. The full picture may never come, but that's exactly what makes Cliff Richard one of the most compelling figures in music history. If this story hit different for you, smash that like button and subscribe. We cover the stories nobody else tells the full truth about. Drop your theories in the comments below. And don't miss our next video. It's another one you won't see coming.